Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of Grace-Filled Parenting. I'm Josh Thames. That's Reed Hillen. And we're really excited to bring you this week's episode. We're working through this idea of not having need as parents, or not reacting through need as parents. And we're picking up where we left off last week when we were talking about kind of these two different ways that we're trying to think about parenting in new ways. Instead of reacting through fear, we react through purpose. And instead of reacting through need, we act through purpose. And Reed and I have been kind of going back and forth here because we think this one's hard. We think the whole thing's hard. We think parenting well is really, really hard. And so this is something, Reed, that I think I struggle with. I think it's hard for me, but as I look at the story, I think it's really, really helpful for me to frame this way. I'm wondering, as you hear not parenting through need, what do you hear and how does that hit you?
At first, it hit me like, what are you talking about? I was pretty confused because I was like, of course, I need my child to do things. I need my child to obey. I need my child to have his ears turned on. I need my child to get up for school. I need my child to eat his breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I need
Sure.
my child to do all of these things, X, Y, and Z. And what I was misunderstanding was what you were saying when you're saying not to parent through need. And so the more we kind of walked it out, the more I was able to start to wrestle with, what am I getting from my need for my child to obey?
Right.
And am I in some way, I don't know, fulfilling this desire to look a certain way to my friends or people in I work in a church, at church, and how my child acts? Is he just going out there as a representation of me?
Mm-hmm.
And is that, and I need him to perform well.
Right.
And so I think the more we kind of get into it like that, the more I can, my brain is started I think I start to understand it a little bit.
I think it's tough. I think you can even get in places too where you can start talking about the subconscious stuff that you're not most of this stuff. I think people that will listen to this podcast are not the ones that aren't here to care about their children. They're the ones trying really hard to parent their children as well. Right. And so this is where we're approaching this from. And we're bad at it and we fail at it often. But when I think about this, there's also this subconscious part of me that am I even trying to work through the wounds I have for my own father, my own mother? And expecting them to fill that for me when I'm doing this. I'm trying to be really good for you. Can you please give this back to me? And that kind of stuff. And I'm not even I don't even think about it, right?
Yeah,
but it's
right.
there.
Yeah.
And I the reason why I come to this idea that in the story of the two sons, Reed, the thought around it is he doesn't ever parent through fear, and he also doesn't parent through need. And one of the things we love about the story that Jesus tells is how he makes his kid the worst, and in a lot of ways is really, really insulting to his father. Some ways, I think this would be interesting for you to kind of get some context to if you wanted to. Some ways that we can't even understand how insulting it is from our cultural context,
Yeah.
right? We get the fact that he's saying hey, I kind of wish you were dead already, and I kind of wish I could get that money. We can recognize what he's saying there, but even further, when I learned about the idea of cultural things, he's basically selling it to the Gentiles. This money, this land was theirs. That people that would have heard that story Jesus say, it wasn't just that he was insulting to the father. He was insulting him, his religion, his culture, his land, his family, his name, his community. There was all of that context.
Yeah.
And I think the point of the story in some ways is that Jesus was trying to create a scenario where everyone to say the father has every right to be upset. The father has every right to be insulted, every right to feel this way. Why does he not react out of that frustration, out of that hurt, out of that, I don't know, anger, and really need of his son to manage all of those things for him? Does that resonate?
Yeah, for sure. My favorite thing about that story is that it is the third of a triad of parables that is telling the same thing over and over again, where something is lost and then it's found and then there's a party. Something is lost and then it's found and there's a party. The first one is a sheep, the second one is a coin, and the third one is an actual child. And the difference is on the third telling, Jesus adds a whole second section.
Right.
And it's this beautiful brilliant. He's such a master teacher. And in this moment, he's talking to a Pharisee, these teachers of the law, and he's gonna confound them with this, and they get really mad at the end because he does this thing where he's like, they understand that context that you just laid out, that like by the son saying, I want it now. I'm going to go to a foreign land and spend it all somewhere else, which means it's not going back into our economy. Like,
Right.
that's awful. And I don't care what happens. I'm just going to go and do whatever I want. And in the telling, upon the return, and the father sprints out to meet him and hugs him and kisses him and gives him the ring and the sandals and the robe and the whole thing. The Pharisees are like, "What's happening?" And then he tells the story of the older son who's in the field the whole time and is learns about the party and is ticked, irate, angry. And the father goes out and meets him as well. And I just love that in the extension of the story, that Jesus is unveiling to the Pharisees their place in the story.
Yeah.
And sometimes as a parent, I actually find myself more like the second the second son, who is
Yeah.
like, if you would just do the right things, then these things would happen. If you were
Yeah.
just more like me, then the XY, then the things that we want to see come to fruition would come to fruition, and that sort of
Right.
thing. And so we are talking about archetypes, and even like idealism in some ways. Like, this is an
Right.
idealistic way to think about parenting. In reality, the day-to-day life of parenting is a really hard journey
Yeah.
of missteps. Like I
Yeah.
think I said this last episode, like, we're not talking about graceful parenting where it looks like a ballerina or an ice skater and it's really beautiful.
Like, thank God, right? Thank God we're not doing that.
Right. We are talking about grace-filled parenting where I am
Right.
rumbling, bumbling, stumbling along
Right.
and leaning into the fact that there is grace to hold me and my mistakes and then therefore my child.
That's right.
And that I don't have to be perfect, and neither is my child, and that there is space for both those things. And therefore, I don't need, for me, it's him, my child, to be perfect so that I look good. I don't need him to bring home all A's so that I feel like I'm doing a good job. I need. I think I said this in one of our Marco Polos about this. I think the need that I have is I need my child to know and hold and hopefully hold space for my love. Maybe that might be the need, but like the need for performance stuff, I'm trying to like wrestle with it. Of like,
Yeah.
am I responding or am I reacting from these desires that look a certain way,
Right.
these masks that I'm asking him to put on to be a certain way,
Sure.
and those sorts of things. So that's where I really am and coming to terms with it in some ways. Of like, gee whiz, this is a hard one.
I think it's so hard. And so like I want to make sure that everyone understands the thought processes here are through like desire and hope and cultivation, not of like I do this.
Yeah,
Because I tell you what, like the moments where I react worse and the moments I react through fear is when I am like exasperated about the fact that my kid doesn't understand what I'm going through right then. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah,
You don't get what's happening to me right now. It's a Wednesday night. I had a long day. I'm pretty worried about a bill that I didn't expect to have, and like I really don't need you to ask for another popsicle at 8:30 tonight. I don't need
yeah,
that. You need to understand what's going on with me, right? And
yeah,
then that's when my anger and my frustration rises.
yeah.
And what I'm trying to say is that is incredibly human and normal. There's not like you shouldn't do that.
Mm,
Instead, for me, what I try to do is begin to say like I do not need him to understand my context because it's not fair for him to need to know that he doesn't
yeah,
understand what's going on. My cousin was talking about this moment in a and during the pandemic where there was so much upheaval and there's so much going on, and his he worked at a school at the time and they were talking about the budgets, and he was like a high level administrator, and he was telling me the story. He was like, I was just short with everybody. I was like furious that my kid needed extra Cheerios. I was just like, what is that? Like, just normal stuff. I was just, and my wife looked at me and said, he doesn't know you have a budget meeting today. He doesn't know.
yeah,
And it was like, I don't need them to understand me. I need to provide to them,
yeah,
right? I don't
yeah,
I don't need him to perform well on the baseball field for me. It's not
mm,
for me. I don't need him to get grades for me. I don't need it, right? And there's sometimes where I do. I want those things. I even am called to it, but like I don't need it. And
yeah,
it's a different way of thinking about it. I think the father in this story shows us that like we don't we, that we can parent our kids without having them need us.
yeah.
Um in this way, like having that, like our needs be met through them,
Mm.
which I think is really, really hard. But I think it's something that, like, if we can begin to cultivate this idea that, like, I have stability, and this is the word you and I really like, Reed. We have sturdiness,
Mhm.
right? We're like both big like fans of Dr. Becky Kennedy, who creates the book Good Inside, and she talks about this idea of sturdiness. I am okay. So the expectations I have for you, son or daughter, they are for you to grow and develop and have purpose
Mm.
in them, but they are not because you need to sustain me with meeting all these expectations, right? You don't have to maintain my composure. You don't have to maintain my emotions. You don't have to maintain my good graces.
Yeah.
They're all, you have belonging in me. So the expectations are for you.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah. I have a story from one night. Henry was in the bathtub and he did something to intentionally hurt my feelings.
Right.
He did. He knew like I'm
Yeah.
gonna do this thing and it's gonna hurt my feelings. And I'd been on like an Instagram like real thing about empathy with kids and developing empathy. And it's like, I wonder if I could talk to him about how that made me feel and what that would go like.
Yeah.
And it was a train wreck.
Oh,
And
yeah.
not because it's not important to like build empathy for
Sure.
kids, but because me trying to show him how it hurt my feelings was actually me there was a level at which I was probably just needing him to feel bad
Yeah.
instead of just being able to say like, yeah, man, like that was a really mean thing to say.
Right.
Why do you feel like you can say that to me? Right. And that too can build it because then he's like, oh, whoa, instead of me being like, trying to show him how sad
Right.
it made me feel or whatever. It was like, that was not good. That was a train wreck of an encounter. And that leads me to so sometimes of this thing where I make Jesus not a human anymore.
Right.
And there's this story where he is with the disciples. He takes them to the garden and he's about to be arrested and tried and crucified. And he goes and he prays 3 times and he says, will you stay awake with me? He walks off from them and prays and comes back and they all fallen asleep. He asks again, will you stay awake with me? And he goes off and prays and comes back and they've fallen asleep. In that story, we see, and we talk a lot about how Jesus is essentially parenting the disciples in their growth in a lot of ways. And we see in that story that Jesus is frustrated
Right.
that they're falling asleep. It's not like, oh, you guys should wake up. Like he's like, hey guys, wake up.
Right.
Right? Can you not even do this? Can you not do this one thing?
Right.
And I think in that moment, one of the things I learn is like, no, the kids can't. There are times when they can't do the thing you're asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And something bad is going to happen after. And so then what happens?
Right.
Like then what do we do with the moments where something bad does happen after?
Right. And I think that's the thing, Reed, is like what usually we think is like, well, they need to figure it out. And you are right. But what often is happening in that moment, like, no, they can't do this right now. They're not doing well, is they need me to help them get there.
Yeah.
They need me to build this into them. They need me to show them. And if I can bring my stability and my sturdiness and my awareness of what they need in this moment instead of my emotions and my reactions to it, they can actually learn that instead of just being that I don't want to make dad mad or I don't want to make mom upset or I don't want to make mom not like me here and that. You know what I'm saying? Like they can begin to realize like, oh, this isn't about because mom and dad have that handled. They're fine. It's about what I need to do. Yeah. Right. And how I need to be like grow. And like, I think that takes a long time.
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly right. And that's what I would like. That's what I want parents to hear is that like in a lot of ways, Reed and I really struggle with this because we want to make grace-filled parenting practical. Like we do not want to make it this idyllic version of like something that's not real.
Yeah.
Because like I think the idea that like we just shouldn't get frustrated with our kids is not reality. I don't even think that's necessarily what we're saying inside of grace-filled parenting, right? Yeah. Like I don't even think that's a real thing. I think frustration is normal. Also, you desiring a good relationship and having your kid love you well is completely fine and human. It's good. So like, I really want them to be able to love me well. But when that becomes like deeply, deeply hurtful to you when they don't, it takes away the purpose and it focuses on your need, right? They're not loving me well. That hurts my feelings. That makes me feel bad. my focus is not about them giving to me. It's about me providing to them. And if I can say, I am actually fine, I have what I need, I take it as a great blessing when you love me well and we have a good relationship.
Mm.
But like my purpose here is for you, not the other way around.
Mm.
I think that's what we're called to. I think that's what the story of in Luke 15 is about, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I want you I want that,
Yeah.
but I don't need it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be a safe place for you either way. I'm gonna hold this this space where if you do choose to go to a distant country and waste all of our inheritance on frivolous living, you can come home to me,
Yeah.
and I will still run down the driveway to you. And if you're a child who is who's made only ever made A's and you're overperforming and you're doing every single thing we ask you to do, and then you get really mad at our kindness to if you have a sibling, or if whatever it is, like I'll still step out of the party to come and talk to you to tell you that you still belong with me. Everything that I
Yeah.
have is yours.
I
Yeah.
don't know if this is, I think this is generalized, so I think we have to be careful with it. But I think most people read that have moms and dads that are intentional about showing them, I love you and I would love for you to be here, but that's not what I need. It gives the opportunity for the kid to love the parent because they were first loved, not because it was required of them, right?
Right.
It's like you didn't love me because I needed it. You had to sustain me.
Mm.
You can love me because you have felt and experienced that love, and that love is automatically like there's something that grows in me that brings me towards that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's something that shaped and formed in me that, like, man, that like mom and dad love me well, and I love
Mm.
them too,
Yeah.
right? Not because mom and dad like I did what they needed me to do and they sustained their love for me. And like I think here's the other thing too. I think there's a lot to say inside of this, and I think I would love for us to take pieces of this and have other
Yeah.
episodes. But I think these are the moments that we have to communicate really effectively, because I think a lot of times this is how parents are trying to approach it. And I
Mm.
think maybe it's possible that our sweet kids that are beautiful and wonderful and smart, and also kids don't get stuff. Even if we're not intending to communicate these ideas,
Right.
they still rise. I
Mm.
didn't get that A, or I struck out, or I messed up, or I got written in my folder at school, or I got in big trouble. That means mom and dad are going to be this way. And us saying to them directly,
Mm.
this is what is true of me and will always be. And this is why I'm frustrated or upset or whatever. It's not because of I need something from you. It's because I'm fearful for you, man. I need you. I want you to have what you need. I
Mm.
don't want you to suffer. I think communicating those things and saying them directly out loud is
Mm.
so vital.
Mm. I'm I'm Lent is coming up, and I'm wrestling with, like, a couple years ago I gave up harshness toward Henry for Lent because I found myself being short, like you were saying about your cousin. Like I was just like everything had happened. I was like, why? What are you talking about? Like I was just it was so everything was too quick. I was just
Yeah,
mean to
yeah,
him
right,
sometimes. It's like, what am I doing? I don't want to be mean to him. That's crazy. He's like 3 or whatever, whatever year it was. Like
right, right. Yeah,
what was happening? He's just a kid trying to be a kid. Of course he's asking 100 questions. That's what kids do.
yeah.
Um, and so I'm wrestling with, like, I wonder what it would look like for me this Lent to Ash Wednesday's on March what 5th? Is it that Wednesday? Whatever that
I think
Wednesday
you're right.
is.
Yeah,
To put down my as best I can those unhealthy needs.
hmm.
And I'm trying to think of like a specific one that I could wrestle with, but just something where I'm in my parenting journey. I want to offer up this to God and say, like, I want to learn to parent from this grace-filled perspective, from this orientation, rather than from my need of looking a certain way or being perceived a certain way
Yeah.
by others.
One of the things for me it would be Reed is I really want my son to be respectful,
Mm.
and the thing that I would want to lay down and fast from is the need to be respected. I I want him to be respectful because it's good for him to respect people well and to like take care of other people and to like understand what is appropriate and good and right to say, not because I need to be respected in his eyes. So when I asked him to
Mm.
respect me, it's not because he's filling a need in me. It's because he needs to develop that for him.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's like big for me. It is
Wow.
like when he
Yeah.
talks like that, I really hey man, you got to respect me in that. And like, what if that's not the point? His
Mhm.
respecting of me is for him and not for me, right? I think that would be something that I would have to work on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one that might be the one.
That might
That
be
might
it.
be
That
it.
might
That
be
might
it.
be
It is
like
for
the
me for
cornerstone
sure.
piece in my brain of like, oh, I think that's it. Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that a lot. That's gonna be mine. I'm stealing. Second. We're
We
both
can
doing
all
that
steal
one.
it. I know
I don't
I
have
need it
anything
in
else,
for sure.
so that's the one I'm stealing.
I would be interested in people that were listening to
Yeah,
think about, what you're giving up for Lent,
yeah.
and like, is there something in parenting that would be good maybe to restructure or maybe even to let go for a time? I think it's an interesting way of thinking about it. Is there something that we can hold looser? Is there something we can set down
Mm,
for a time? Is there something that would be good for us to do that, good for our kids to do that? I think that's worthy of at least consideration. That's
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. That'd be fun. And then send us what you're working on Instagram. Send us what you are gonna do for the Lent season in your parenting. Like what are you gonna offer up to God in trust
Hmm.
that God's gonna provide for that season?
It's good, man. Episode 4. That's solid right there, man.
Fun stuff.
That's right. We'll see you guys
All right.
soon.
All right. See you.